Flower Evo Devo by Mary Bolton. We often admire flowers over their beauty, which is usually short-lived. Flowers are the primary reproductive structure of most plants and essentially serve the purpose of attracting pollinators. Pollinator is a general term for an animal that transports pollen from one flower to another. Common examples of pollinators include bees, butterflies, bats, and birds. The practice of using pollinators to deliver pollen is known as outcrossing, while plants that cannot rely on pollinators for reproduction practice what is called selfing, or self-pollination. Most plants, however, are capable of both. Pollinators play a huge role in which flowers get pollinated. Some flowers even have hidden instructions that tell pollinators what to do. As stated by Grant and Grant, 1965, and Stebbins, 1970, in flowering plants, the diversification of floral form has often been attributed to pollinator-mediated selection. Pollinator-mediated selection is a sort of evolutionary theory that pollinators and their specific tastes have caused flowers to change their shape and form in order to better suit those tastes. This perspective also allows us to expect adaptive evolution based on changes in abundance or identity of effective pollinators. Plant species that are spread out geographically may exhibit different flower forms based on the abundance of pollinators in their relative areas. So plants rely on both selfing and outcrossing for their pollination, but the rates at which the plant is selfing is usually dependent on the abundance and capacity of pollinators. In David A. Moeller's Geographic Structure of Pollinator Communities, Reproductive Assurance, and the Evolution of Self-Pollination summary, Moeller describes his experiment that tests the evolution of selfing for reproductive assurance. Moeller states, reproductive assurance is often invoked as an explanation for the evolution of self-fertilization in plants. However, key aspects of this hypothesis have received little empirical support. Moeller performed two experiments. Experiment 1 involved testing floral trait variation and autofertility, while Experiment 2 tested whether or not autonomous selfing provided reproductive assurance. I'm going to focus on his second experiment. Moeller chose to study the flower species Clarkia xanthiana, which is a predominantly outcrossing species, and Clarkia xanthiana subspecies parviflora, which mostly relies on selfing for reproduction. Both species are within the same genus, but are located in geographically different parts of Southern California. Xanthiana presents large flowers, while parviflora presents flowers that are reduced in size. Moeller states that these mating traits are correlated strongly with rates of outcrossing. I mentioned earlier how plants will change their morphology to attract pollinators. Well, pollinators can also evolve to better pollinate their associated plants. Over time, Clarkia species have also acquired these specialized pollinators. The species of bee, Hesperapis regularis, is a solitary pollinator that specializes in pollinating species in the Clarkia genus. These bees have specialized hairs on their legs to accommodate the large clump pollen grains of Clarkia. Moeller took geographic surveys of bee visitor assemblages along with general pollinators. He sampled visitor communities at 2 sites that contained multiple plants of the 2 Clarkia species. Moeller collected flower visitors by hand and also through pan trapping. Populations to the west of Isabella Lake belong to the subspecies xanthiana, and those to the east belong to subspecies parviflora. The inset chart shows a comparison of specialist and generalist bee abundance for populations of the 2 subspecies. For subspecies xanthiana, geographically central populations are the 5 westernmost populations. Peripheral populations are the 5 easternmost populations. The results of this survey provide valuable backing for the theory that pollinators play a role in flower selfing rates. The abundance of bees was about 4.4 times higher in C. xanthiana than in C. parviflora populations. Specialist pollinators represent about 59% of the pollinators observed for C. xanthiana, while no specialists were found pollinating parviflora. These results also support the idea that parviflora species had to resort to self-pollination due to the lack of pollinators and their geographic location. Years of parviflora primarily relying on their own self-pollination abilities most likely resulted in their reduced flower size. Pollinators play a huge role in what flowers get pollinated, and plant species tend to rely on these pollinators more so when pollinators are abundant. Plants in geographic areas with fewer pollinators have to adapt and rely more so on their ability to self-pollinate. David A. Moeller's studies are extremely valuable because they provide empirical evidence for pollinator-mediated selection and the evolution of self-pollination for reproductive assurance. I want to give a huge shout out to pixabay.com and Free Music Archive for helping me find the stock footage and the royalty-free music playing during this video.